Thanks for listening to another episode of the Weldmonger podcast.
Hey, real quick, before we get into this podcast, here's a PSA for you. Make sure you're signed up at weldmonger.com to receive emails because we'll be announcing a big giveaway really soon, maybe even tomorrow. We'll also be posting the giveaway information on Instagram, so make sure to follow at Weldmonger or at Weldmonger Store so you don't miss out. All right, let's get into the podcast.
My guest today is my good friend JD Brewer. He is Apexish on Instagram, JD Brewer on YouTube.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
And JD and I have been friends a good 10 years. In fact, I looked up to see exactly how long it was. So we met at FabTech, 2015 FabTech in Chicago, and we kind of hit it off right off the bat. And JD told me a story there, standing. I'm going to kind of let him fill in the blanks on that. But he told me a story about how he had made really good money in just a month or two using a very small welder, the Lincoln 210 MP. And I was just fascinated by that because I'm always like, for some reason, it always resonates with me when I hear somebody that does a lot with a little. Like they took, they started a whole business with a cutting torch in a buzz box or something. Stories like that, I always love to hear. So you refresh our memory. You remember that story that you told me there?
Yeah, I remember that. Everything kind of lined up. Had a couple projects that lined up, but what was really cool about all that was what it was a 210 MP, but that was just a 200 amp small inverter welder, which really was kind of new to the scene. Um, and that's what I was impressed with, and what allowed me to do all that. I did a few big jobs, like a mezzanine and something like that, where I had a 6 by 3/8 square tubing onto like 3/4 plate. And I wanted to weld it kind of heavy, and I was able to weld with dual shield flux core with that 200 amp little inverter welder off a generator on site. Um, Better than what I could do with a generator, just running the generator and, running stick leads or a little wire feeder off of it. I was able to do more money with a little inverter. I mean, if you just have good power, you don't even need a generator anymore to like be mobile. That's the biggest thing about it, being mobile.
So I thought what I'll do here is is kind of ask you how you got started in this trade, and then we'll talk about what you're doing lately, interesting, and then we'll fill in a whole lot of gaps in between and maybe reminisce about some stuff that we did together.
So I got started in the trade. Uh, I was doing residential construction, doing gas pipe, and we got a couple big jobs doing commercial pipe. And once I saw that, I got actually exposed to welding. I didn't even know what welding was before that. And then seeing a welder, seeing the paycheck that he got for the amount of work that I thought he did, that really intrigued me for welding. So I went from a commercial job to a welding school. And then after that, I went to a couple fab shops from the welding school. On the job is where you really learn how to do it. The welding school is cool for practice and everything. Gets your foot in the door, gets you exposed to the world, and then kind of easy to find a job through a welding school, because people that need welders, that's one of the places they do look. Did a couple fab shops, and then got a call for a big construction job. Went to my first big construction job at a power plant. That was a lot of fun, like a lot of fun, a lot of money, but you got to travel. That I went from light commercial fab shop to heavy industrial, and that was a lot of fun. It's a big jump in work. That's where you have safety people trying to fire you and check you out. You got QC following you around, trying to check your welds. You got to make sure everything's good. You got to follow the procedure, do everything to code. Uh, that's where I really learned how to weld and fabricate and just construction. I learned that all in industrial. And then now, the only thing that kind of stinks about industrial is those big jobs are few and far between. And as in like location, where I live in my neighborhood, they're not building a power plant in my neighborhood. I got to go over there. And then once you build that one, you got to go over there. So you got to kind of chase that. And then doing that, you'll get laid off a lot. You almost kind of work You almost work from like February to November, then you get laid off, and then you sometimes get another job February to November. And I kept doing that. I kind of found myself in that loop. So then I was like, I'm going to try to start my own thing. Once I had worked at a couple different places, I had a couple contacts. So once I started my own business, I went back around to the fab shops I dealt with, told them what I did. I went back to the businesses that I've worked for along the way and told them that I'm doing that stuff. And now it's kind of snowballed. It's kind of easy to get going. It's a lot harder to keep it going.
I see you working on some pipe right now.
Yep. That's a good job. Pipe was the first thing I'd learned. First job I ever had was doing residential gas pipe and then commercial gas pipe. And I wanted to get away from turning a wrench. I didn't want to turn a pipe wrench my whole life. I'm like, this is too much work. I'm gonna go weld. Welding is one part of pipe, but then if you do all the downstream, that's what will really get you the job. So welding is only one part. It's only one part of what I do, and it's only one part of what I see everybody do. I don't see very many, like on Instagram or any social media or stuff, you don't see very many solo welders that they just maybe go from a shop to a shop to a shop and they just weld. You got to use a bandsaw. You got to use a grinder. You got to use something along the way. Everybody I know is a fabricator. They're the smallest part of their day is welding.
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal for anybody in business for themselves. Yeah, it's just like you got to be willing to, you got to know, how to figure out the job. And in order to figure out the job and what to charge for the job, you got to be a decent layout person to know what's involved there. You got to know how to make a bill of materials and what takeouts are and what material types there are and who to call to get that material. And it's a big long laundry list of stuff that you have to know to do to make it in business for yourself, unless you just take pick a side hustle. A side hustle's different. Like when I started a side hustle, there were very few jobs that I actually bought the material, maybe one or two. Almost all of them were machine shops, mom and pop machine shops. They would bring the stuff to me, whether it was a one-off, just fixing a missed machine part, or some small parts that needed a little assembly and weld. I might make 100 parts, assemble them, tack them, weld them. The machine shop would even make a fixture for me, so I didn't have to figure out any material. All I was out was argon, filler metal, and time, pretty much. And but I did okay, way better than like getting a side part-time job somewhere for extra money. But all I had to do was that. I didn't have to get into what you do and risk. There's a big risk involved when you pony up several $1,000s for all that material and you ain't got paid yet.
So here's something. What I do with my material, I charge, if I'm ordering material, I charge 50%. I mark it up 50%. And that's a lot of money. Guess what? I have never thought that I'm pocketing money. Me ordering the material, sourcing it, delivering it, finding it, that time, I'm never coming out ahead. If I mess up, I got to buy more material that comes out of that markup. I've talked to a couple people that want to start their own thing. This is what I tell them. It's kind of funny. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to be the boss? Do you want to make money, or do you want to do you love it? Do you just want to build? If you want to be the boss, it's like you should just keep your job and stay in management and go middle management. If you want to be the boss where you just tell people what to do and you make the money, that you don't get there, that's 20 years down the road. If you want to make money, you should keep a job and do a side hustle, and then tell people you're a welder. Get you a welder at the home. It's so easy to get a welder now. When we first met, it was the MP210. There wasn't any other. Did Miller have like a real portable?
Not at that price point.
Yeah,
They first came out, they were under 1,000, right? The Lincoln, and then they gradually drifted it up, but they first hit the market at right $999, I think it was. And that was amazing at the time. Now things have there are even machines that are less, that are probably just as good.
In fact, here's a perfect example of that. This is a Prime Weld 200 amp MTS, so it's kind of comparable to that 210 MP. Comes with an air-cooled TIG torch with a valve, and it's under 800.
If I would recommend, I tell you, anybody that is a that TIG welds for a living, for instance, if you need to have a TIG welder in your garage, because the work will just find you. Just, somebody throwing $100 at you just for 30 minutes of work can't beat that sometimes, and you kids are inside, you don't have to go get home at 9 o'clock at night to work overtime and everything and just make 100 here, 100 there, a couple hundred here, doing odds and ends. I want to have an episode on here on side hustle ideas, but I've come across just working with people. There's one guy, somehow I don't know if he had any special contacts or what, but he bought a small TIG back in the day, which back then he probably wasn't that small. It was probably a Synchrowave 250 or something. That was really not much else on the market available that, uh, I don't know what he had. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But anyway, he would go to Home Depots and any big store that had a metal shopping carts. He said, "Man, people tear those things up, and they're like $500 a piece." And so I would, or more now, yeah. But back then they were about 500 a piece, and they're always getting torn up and unsafe. Where some of one of the spot welded little bars would pop off, and it'd be a hang point, and somebody might cut themselves on it or whatever. So he was charging like, I don't know, something like, let's just say $50 a piece to fix them. And he said, I'd pull up with a flatbed truck and load up 20 of them or so, a flatbed trailer, I should say. I'd load up 20. He said, I could have done them in the parking lot easily, but I didn't want them to see that it only took me like 5 minutes to fix each one, So I'd take them back to my shop. I'd, fix them. And occasionally I'd have to cannibalize one, tell them it was beyond repair. And then I'd have parts, to fix other ones, and he said, I'd fix all 20 of them in just a few hours, $50 a pop, and they were happy to pay it. And I'd shoot a little chrome paint, to make it look blended in, with the rest of it and where the weld was. And I'd take them back. And I did that. Like I'd go around, I'd get me a load a week, he's making like $1,000 a week. And then I would see these guys at work sometimes and they were swapping parts back and forth between cars. And some of where they were swapping like rolled 11 gauge, hot rolled, rings of it rolled, and then this and that. And then, I'm like, finally I asked him one day, what are you guys doing? It's wine barrel furniture. It's hot right now. So we're just like making these coffee tables and chairs and stuff out of old wine barrels and band it, and then they could weld, and he's making a killing, So, but I would never think of, starting a side hustle like that, but somebody thought of it.
And everything's so, not only is the welder affordable and portable and all that kind of stuff, uh, saws, everything that goes along with it. Those chop saws that we have now are so great. I mean, you could have that little, for like $400, you get one of those chop saws. You could have that. You can cut everything that you would need for a side hustle, and it's a little chop saw. You can keep that tucked away in the garage. Like you could just be at the house and everywhere. I hate to say it, America's declining. Across the board, all these little towns. One of their biggest uh, uh, commerce is antique malls. Some counties you go into them, here in like rural Georgia and stuff, you might have 3 antique malls. That's it. That's all that's there. That and a Walmart and all this other stuff. You could probably fix half the stuff, plus sell half those antique marks that I go through. You could sell stuff in there too, like brand new things, yard signs, stuff you could cut out with a plasma. Uh, you do teams, colleges. I mean, there's a million different things you could sell stuff like that for like a side hustle. You probably make a lot of money just doing little dinky stuff at the house.
Yeah.
Probably be a lot richer than me. I mean, honestly, I mean,
Well, I tell you, this is another thing's coming to mind. I had a friend who he could weld. He came through a training class, and so he could TIG and MIG, and he got a little. I don't know what he got. He had a little welding setup in his garage, And I was asking him one day about was he doing anything with it? He said, I was doing a little bit. He said, but man, he said, this cornhole thing, this was back, when cornhole hit all these bars and they were all having competitions in the parking lot and all that. And he said, there's no way I can make as much welding as I can making those things. And they don't take any time at all. Got a pattern set up and table saw or whatever he was doing them with, nail gun or screw. I don't know what he was making, but he'd throw them together and paint them and he'd sell them to all these sports bars, and he was doing well. But you got to
Hmm.
be willing to pivot. Like I probably would have been, I don't want to do that. I'm no woodworker. But you know, hey, money's good. I probably become one. Tell us a little bit about the pipe job you're doing now. I was kind of amazed at watching you use the fireball to fit the pipe with there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just that table. You know, you have the Build Pro, and that's amazing when that first came out. But it's one sided. One plane. The Fireball table, you got a five-sided table, and it's a big side. It's 8 inches down on the side. Everything we do is square, so you're normally hanging something off the edge of the table, anyways. Just being flat, and then the Fireball tools. All the tools are great. Those mega squares. How many things did you ever build that you wanted to try to clamp, a 90 together? I have all the pipe tools. I got the pipe stand. I got the pipe wrap. I got the clamps. I got multiple clamps. I've got multiple pins. I've got wedges. I got angle. I got chain clamps. I got everything I need to fit pipe. I can just drop it on that table though, and I'm done in like 2 seconds. I'm like, that's really easy. You put in a jack stand, you got to get the jack stand level, and then you get the pipe level. Then you put a clamp on there, then you got to put the 90 on there, then you got to make a tack, then you can pull the 90 around, then you wedge it, then you do this and that, and you got to do it underneath.
Yeah.
And I just dropped it on the table, turned it 90 degrees, and tack, tack, tack.
It's all that's exactly what I was thinking about because it was reminding me of my pipe days. And it's like I said, it was it's different in a fab shop than it is on site, but it's not too different. Like even in fab shops, you got a tripod vise, you got jack stands, and you're hitting it with your hip and you're tapping it with a hammer and moving it and trying to rotate, get it. And it's not a perfect efficient operation really. Where you can't just like I said, just lay it there and it's right dead nuts square and clamped before you ever put the first tack on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
There's so many fabrication tips and tricks that like say get an outside corner joint, maybe tacking it off and then holding it a certain way and then being able to hold it and then bump tacking it with a TIG torch or something. I love it. I'm forgetting all of that stuff because
Yeah.
Fireball's so easy. You just clamp what you pull one side over the edge, you clamp it, you pull this thing over here and you clamp it, and you just weld it, and then you just get the best joint ever.
When I fabricated anything, it was old school. Basically, all I had was a frame and square and not much else. Just like Jason with Fireball talks about. That's why he developed this stuff is because that's how he started, and that's all the company would offer: a speed square, tri square, and a frame and square, and a torpedo level and a 2 foot level, and go to town. Tack it here and then pull it straight. And now it's not straight this way. Now bump it that way, and you get used to that. And you get pretty fast at it. You know about how to hold it. You know how it's going to draw when you put that first tack on it. So you don't even hold it square to start with. You side a square and it draws over that way, and you work through it and get pretty efficient at it, but not as efficient as when you got the stuff like the Fireball stuff.
Yeah,
That
it
really
takes all the
speeds things
thinking
up.
out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, it also I don't want to sound fluffy here, but it opens your mind uh, to the possibilities when you start working with. Oh, geez, I could just do this. I got an automatic.
But when I think of how to do something now with the Fireball table, everything I do, I'm like, I wonder if I could fit it this way. It works that way. I've never fit a piece of pipe I've never fit a flange off the edge of a table to a piece of pipe straight on the other on the table. But with the tooling, I had little V blocks, and then the table is square. I put the flange as a slip-on flange. I put it on the edge of the table. It held it perfectly 90. and perfectly two hold. So I go, okay, well, I mean, that's really easy. So it's kind of like if we had three people that had three different ideas, if you had that table, you could literally could have three different ideas all jigged up probably in 5 or 10 minutes. And then whoever didn't get it done in 5 or 10 minutes, well, your idea is definitely not going to work. You could probably you could probably sit there and choose between two different ideas instead of just bickering about it. The old way we would just bicker about it, and then we'd have to go get the boss, and he'd be like, "This guy's in charge," and then one guy'd be disgruntled the whole day, and then
Yeah.
honestly, I'm just saying, Fireball tool might solve a lot of job site violence,
And
problems.
marriages possibly even.
You get
Yeah.
by. You go home. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
because you get pissed off at that guy, and then you're pissed off all day. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Because I think
It's
of crazy things to fit, like that 180. I'm like, how do I do this? And then
Let me just show this real quick. We'll get back to talking to JD in a second. He had this little pipe job to do using a 180 fitting. I don't know the application for the job anyway, but I think you can see that using the index table there from Fireball, along with the squares, and then of course the shims that he has in different thicknesses, you can make short work out of a little project like this.
yeah.
so
I
easy.
came up with the Build Pro. I came up with some things that I never thought I would have when I first got it. I had some just small parts to do, but they were kind of like fitting a flange where you had to have it two hold and square and this, that, and the other, and you needed to spin it while you welded it and moved it and got four tacks on it, and it almost it almost put itself together. When I started thinking about all the little accoutrements, the little stops and the V blocks and the spacers and you know, and it really did. I would have never thought about that on make. And I worked with guys that made fixtures. I thought it was, from scratch, just out of scrap. That's pretty intriguing to watch somebody make something out of thin air. Like make a fixture to the part's already made, so they make a fixture
Mm-hmm.
so they can make five more parts just like it. That's pretty intriguing, but it's nothing like a modular fixture. Not the same thing, really. It's kind of similar because you start thinking in the same direction. You start thinking about things you never would have thought about. Like I could do this and I could do this, but
Mm-hmm.
it's all right there in front of you. It's a visual stimuli, I guess you would say. You looking at all your tooling laying there. hmm Okay, I can. Yeah, this is going to work. Speeds it up, speeds things up like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Jason's a savant.
Oh yeah.
He's a. It's good. It's good. It's fun to watch him talk about all his how he evolves, how he comes up with the ideas and stuff like that. Dual shield flux core. Let's go. Let's camp out on that for a minute. Yeah, I had never touched it. The one of the nuclear plants that it's actually, let's see, it's the first nuclear plant that I went to work on. They gave a 6-inch heavy wall dual shield flux core 6G pipe test. Okay, and so that's what I thought I was going to take. And so I was going to practice on that at school, but then they changed the test like last minute to TIG stick. I'm like, well, I'm ready to go take that one. And so I went, and then so they pretty much, I don't know, they were having a bunch of X-ray problems. They were trying to use dual shield in the field, in tight spots and everything, and it just were having a lot of X-ray failures. And so they switched over to TIG all the way on a lot of that heavy wall, or TIG stick. And so I never got a chance to really. That was my chance to do dual shield, and I didn't get to do it. So all my whole career, I never did it until I met you. And so you started talking about it and touting it and tell me, well, no, man, you got to see this. You got to, you know. I had no idea because I'm thinking when I'm thinking of MIG or whatever, I'm thinking if you're going uphill, you got to jump through all kinds of hoops to keep it from piling up on you and have a certain technique and manipulation. You're like, no, no, you just hold it in there and go straight uphill, really. So working with you on that was just such a mind boggle. I won't say the other.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a mind. It opened my mind to the benefits of it. And then we did several. I don't know how many videos you and I kind of worked on together. Where you did the work, I did the camera work. One of which was a 60-foot long rack for, I don't know what product it was, but it was 60 foot long. And some people, chimed in talked about how metal core would be better, and you can always flip it over and do flat and horizontal. I'm thinking, really, you want to flip a 60-foot rack every time you just so you can have a flat or horizontal weld rather than just go uphill with dual shield? Made no sense whatever. I thought dual shield was the absolute perfect process for so much of the stuff that you did and do. So how you got started? What, a powerhouse doing dual shield?
Yep. My very first job was a structural welder. First big job was a structural welder at a power plant. And so when I first hired in, uh, they hired in a bunch of people, and so they didn't let us take both tests. They asked me which one I wanted, and all I was really kind of familiar with was when I went to welding school, I did stick and TIG. I didn't do MIG. I thought anybody could do MIG, and I didn't take the class for it, so I didn't know anything about MIG whatsoever. So I didn't really want to do flux core. So I got in the door with stick, and I was welding, and then I got around a wire feeder, and I asked the guy, I was like, "Hey, show me this." Showed it to me, and I was like, "Okay, it's just like a 7018. It's just faster, kind of. It welds a little bit different, but you know, he showed me what to set it at, and then I just copied it because we're doing the same thing." So then a little bit later on that job, probably 6 months later, kind of thing, I went and just took a weld test one day. The QC was down, and we didn't have any higher ends, kind of thing, and went in there and took the wire test. So then I was certified on wire, and the job I was doing was I was sealing up the fan houses, and where they put the two pieces of metal together, they wanted weld as caulk, kind of, so no air, dirt, anything else could come in. Once I learned how to do dual shield flux core, every time you do stick, I used to burn like 20, 30 pounds a day of like 1/8, just, you know, welding those cracks, just welding, welding, welding. It's really slow. And then once I did wire, my footage of what I got done during the day. So then I could kind of do twice as much work, 25% of the time. I started just kind of playing around at work because dual shield was so much faster. I had to get so much done. I could get it all done before lunch. So dual shield's awesome, in that
Yeah,
aspect.
that's what I was blown away at, the speed, how much quicker it is, especially on uphill. I mean, if you're running, well, on anything really, doesn't matter what position. I mean, you can even run a big, horizontal fillet well with a 532 or 3/16, and you still can't keep up with dual shield, because you
No,
just
and
can't,
especially,
you can't really max it out hardly. Uh, and we got a video of going uphill with 045 wire. And I think the wire feed speed, we were pretty much max. We were like 5, and it still put a good looking weld in there. We just trucked along vertical uphill, just cramming it in there.
and here's a perfect example of why I use it and like it. So I did a staircase, and it was really wide. I want to say it was about 3 foot, had 3 foot steps. And I did something to where I had a weld the whole length of it. And I forgot my gas. So I was all set up to run wire, dual shield or whatever, but I didn't have my bottle of gas. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and start welding them out. I'll get as much done as I can with stick. That first step that I did 1/8, because there's only like the steps like 3/16 material or something like that. Uh, the first step that I welded with 1/8, I bowed it and warped it so bad that I had to cut it out and redo it. You weld so fast. I put down a bigger weld faster with dual shield. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe what I'm talking about, how the exact same thing, dual shield does it perfect and stick warps it.
There's a mathematical formula, a heat input formula, but travel speed is the biggest factor. If you speed up your travel speed, it really lessens heat input. And so
Because
the
I was
speed, the
probably,
difference in speed between a 7018 1/8 and dual shield is tremendous. And I mean, it's still got the amps, still got the flux, still got the penetration, but it's just so much faster. It was super eye opener for me. I've got a video ready to post, and I think I'll post it first, and then this podcast will post probably. I talked about it, about how dual shield. I think it's still underutilized by a lot of small shops. I just don't think people realize how good it is, how productive you can be with it.
I do have one good story about that. I talked to somebody at FabTech, and uh, he's got a product that he sells, And he said that he watched our videos and he got so many orders. He was doing so well in business that he was behind, needed to speed up production. And the product that he's welding, he was stick welding it. And then he swapped over to doing dual shield flux core. That allowed him to start making time up without changing anything other than the welding process, putting more product out the door. Instantly ups production. That's pretty cool.
I understand that it's like spray. You can really go hot. You can really go fast, and all that. But for out of position stuff, like that has light mill scale on it, not necessarily heavy, but light square tubing and shapes like that you make mezzanines out of or stair treads and things like that, and not having to clean it and having that flux. I don't know. I just think it's underutilized. A lot of people would benefit by trying it out. And again, bringing that small machine up. A lot of people don't realize you can run it off a fairly small MIG welder that comes in 035, good quality dual shield like the Lincoln 71M. Comes in 035 too, and you can get a lot done with it. So in that video that I talked about that I will probably post before this does, I was comparing all the major wire processes, dual shield, short circuit MIG. I've got a different experience, but I said in that video, I'm going to have somebody on there who's kind of got like a different perspective on hardwire, short circuit MIG, and you're the person. So you're devil's advocate right now because I know that you have had to go behind and redo stuff that was welded with short circuit MIG. And some of those times where it was a guy that or a company that a contractor that beat you out on the price, and then they had to send you in to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So, I've got my experience. Like my first experience with short circuit MIG was at a fab shop, and they wanted me to do this certain job, and I had to get certified for it. So they sent me to the test shop to take a 5G pipe test, downhill route, uphill fill and cap with short circuit MIG, 6-inch schedule 80, Come back. I noticed there's a job going on all day, every day. There's a guy welding like 36-inch pipe, two full lengths of it, maybe three sometimes. And it was a big pedestal with a MIG gun on it and an oscillator on it. And so he would set it up and he'd tack it. He was scheduled, like, I think it was schedule 40. So that's roughly a half-inch thick when talking pipe that big, I think. And he'd set that MIG gun slightly downhill to run the route. It was on automated turntable, right? So he's just looking at it with a pendant controller in his hand. He'd go slightly downhill, run the route, and then he'd set it up for slightly uphill, like about 10 o'clock or so. And then he'd do fill and cap. So route, fill, cap, 3 passes, done. The thing looked like a wedding band. Move on to the next one. And these were all, QC'd and X-rayed and all that stuff. And that was short circuit MIG, not spray, not pulse. And this was in the very late 90s. I mean, 80s, I should say. So pulse spray wasn't really popular at that time. And so I knew it was capable of, more than just extremely light fabrication, but also saw that for the fill in the cap, he's going slightly uphill and he's going good and hot and he's doing an open groove that's perfectly clean metal because it's all no mill scale, no nothing, right? Then that same shop, there's a guy, an old hand. They wanted to weld so they wanted him to weld a lifting lug onto a half sleeve for a pipe. It was probably an inch thick, so it probably weighed 500 or 600 pounds, And he was MIG welding normally throughout the day, and he gets a 7018 out to weld that lifting lug, and I'm like, man, why don't you just MIG it? He's like, I don't trust it, So it's like this guy's over here welding these pipes all day long, and they're X-raying and everything, but then also he welded kind of cold with MIG, for a pretty bead. So it's kind of like my take is this. If you weld, you got to go hot enough. And if you go uphill and you got clean metal and you got to open wide enough angle, like a T-joint fillet weld or a groove weld pipe, you can do okay with short circuit MIG. But downhill over hot rolled mill scale or rust or anything, no good. It's almost like no matter how hot you want to go, you could screw up and it come loose. And we got pictures all over Instagram of things like that where somebody's done a weld and it looks perfect, and then somebody slides a ace of spades behind the weld, because it just pulled loose.
And I've never done that on a stick weld, and I've never done that on a dual shield flux core weld. As bad as they look, you've never been able to slide a card or anything like that underneath one of those welds.
Yeah,
That's why people trust it. I mean, it's like I know how to weld and I can weld MIG and I've done it, but I've also had tacks that broke completely off. I've never had a stick tack. I've had a
yeah,
stick tack break, but not like it didn't fuse at all. It
yeah.
just, in the middle more so kind of. But yeah, everyone who's welded MIG has had a tack or weld or something break where you're like, huh, pretty sure I welded that good. Look good. It's like being lied to. You're never at 100% again. That weld lied to you. It's like, oh, I don't trust it now.
I was going to say the same thing. Anybody that's ever fabricated over something like, it's usually it even happens on sometimes on something like eighth inch wall square tubing where you hit it with a short tack and you're good and hot enough, you think, hot enough to weld it once you get heat build up, but then that tack just pops and doesn't just break in the middle. It just pulls loose. It didn't bite, on one
Mm-hmm.
side or the other. We've all seen that on short circuit MIG. And so it is something, you know, to be concerned about as far as, especially people that set it cold just for the sake of a pretty weld or go downhill over mill scale. Those are I think the two biggest culprits because if you got clean metal, I haven't really had much problem. I've done like if I'm doing something, I ground it completely. It's clean, bright metal. I'm at 23 volts and 480 inches a minute or something with 035 wire, good and hot. It's a rare thing that I would have a tack break even on that. Even spatter sticks to clean, bright metal usually. But yeah, if you're welding over any mill scale at all, it has a tendency to cold lap, and so you have to be really careful with short circuit MIG. 100%. I've used it on some things like, and it's like I said, I'm looking at that fab shop and seeing this heavy duty work that they're doing with this thing, but it is automated. The guy's doing what he's supposed to do. He's welding with the right parameters, and he was welding to a procedure too, so he wasn't at liberty to just crank it down and putter along and make a cold caterpillar pretty laced in bead.
Mm-hmm.
So he's probably up around 23 volts and cranking, pumping some heat in there. But yeah, yeah. I remember watching, I don't know if you just sent me a text or whatever, or video. It was like, I think it was something like bumper plates on a loading dock or reflector plates on a loading dock or whatever. And basically you were breaking them off with your bare hands. They had welded them with hard wire.
Hardwired downhill. Yeah. I mean, it's a painted bumper dock, and the welder comes around and the welder welds them all, and then they all just fall off. They all just fell off when the tractor hit them.
There's another thing that blew my mind. This is way back, like I said, late 1980s, when I went in the test shop to take that 5G MIG pipe test. Before I get started on it real good, I was just practicing a little bit. The instructor, and this was a pipe test after the gate test, so it was like a whole different vibe. I was more like in somebody's living room, just having a cup of coffee or whatever, no pressure. Oh man, you come to get it. We're gonna make sure you get it. The cert. Like, well, that's different. Than when I hired in here. It's like guys are failing people left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I want you to do me a favor here. They had a little Miller Cricket, which was like one of the very first 115 volt MIGs that Miller made. And he had some 023 wire in there. He said, we need to qualify this wire. And so we're going to do this, what they call the all weld metal test. So basically it's 3 5-inch plates and no bevel, but they're spaced about, I don't know, 3/4, maybe an inch apart with a backer, like 2 5-inch plates and a backer. There's all clean it completely, no mill skill. But said, we're not going to bend test this. We're going to cut out the weld metal and we're going to turn it down to a tensile specimen and pull it. But we want you to weld it all the way up with this little MIG because it's all we got set up for 023 wire. So, like, man, that's a tall order welding 5/8 plate with this thing. So anyway, I just welded each root pass and by the time I'd get to the last inch, it'd start kind of sputtering because it was hitting the duty cycle, you know. So I'd let the machine cool off a minute, run the root pass, and then run another pass. Another pass took me probably, I don't know how many. It took a lot of passes to fill that thing up, but it did it, you know. And you could kind of see it biting in there, but it was uphill and it was perfectly clean metal, you know. So even a
Hmm.
115, you can even do a lot with. Well, you know, we were on a job together. We were using 023 wire, and it wasn't anything structural, but we were kind of, you know, but it was getting the job done off a drop cord.
Hmm.
But you got to know what you're doing. You got to be careful. You don't, you know, don't think that just because you ran a pretty bead with short circuit MIG that it is in there.
Hmm.
But like you said, when you got flux, either with stick or with dual shield flux core, the flux makes a huge difference. You know, because it's eating that mill scale
Hmm.
chemically as well as the arc penetrating and
Where does the mill scale go when you run over it with MIG? You know, the MIG is so fast and it solidifies so fast that as you're going, if you're doing a MIG weld and you don't clean it at all, and you're just going over the mill scale, you'll see it undercut, and that's one of the worst things about welding over mill scale. It'll undercut real bad, but it gets absorbed right into that weld. And what's it doing in there? It can't be good. Like the 7018 cools a little bit slower and it has all that flux. So say that might rise up to the top and say get collected in the slag. MIG doesn't have that. So I mean, are you just really putting that right in the middle of the weld metal? You're really contaminating the entire weld,
that's a pretty good question. I
you
think to
know?
an extent that silicon, that brown silicon that you see also has oxides from the mill scale mixed in with it. That's what it's supposed to do is scavenge out that stuff and float up to the surface. But that's a perfect scenario. That's what you want it to do. I think it's a limit to how much thick mill scale it can handle, you know, and then the rest of it probably does just kind of get locked in the weld metal as oxide stringers and such, which is not good. It's not necessarily horrible, just like a little bit of fine porosity inside a weld. A lot of welds have it, you know. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. Kind of like when you TIG over hot rolled, and it comes to the surface at a whole bunch of little dots of silicon, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't look like near enough than what was it boiling out of there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when you're TIG welding over it. So that's why on anything critical it is either use a process that can handle it or clean it. Well, I want to save
Mm-hmm.
some stuff for next time
Yeah.
for the next podcast.
Hey, I got one thing for all welders. I got a first aid tip.
Okay.
I, I hurt myself. I think it's too much. I got all these good first aid tips. So, anyways, today I permanently altered my fingerprint. I burnt the snot out of my finger. Igor, my
Yeah.
buddy,
Yeah.
he was around. I burnt myself. If you're like TIG welding and you go to grab the tungsten or when you get those really hot, crisp burns. I did that in front of him and he ran and got Neosporin and put it on there real quick. Anyways, he put Neosporin on there. I just kind of held it there and let it dry or whatever. Takes all the burn out of it.
No
I
kidding.
I burnt the snot out of my finger today. I mean, sizzled it. I heard it. I've permanently changed my fingerprint, and it doesn't hurt. So everyone burns themselves.
Yeah, they do.
As soon as you get burnt, not even a band aid. Just put the Neosporin on whatever you burn. Just leave it there for a few minutes. It'll take all the burn. I've done it 3 or 4 times.
Perfect tip.
That's a perfect
Every
tip for
every
any kind of
welder every
welding.
welder burns themselves.
If
I
you get
burn
that one that
myself.
falls down in your shoe and you get
Yeah.
that nasty burn on your shoe, take your shoe off, put Neosporin on. You won't get that infection. Like this almost looks like it's healed up. I mean, it's bad, but
Yeah.
uh, do that.
Yeah.
That's my good tip of
Yeah.
the day.
This is not medical advice because we're not doctors. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Pleasure having you, JD.
Yeah, man.
And
Great talking to you.
we'll do this again real soon
Okay.
and we'll see you next time, brother.
Yeah, man. Good talking to you.